Hi, everyone. My name is Daniil. I'm on the product marketing team at Asana. So a little bit about me. I've been in B2B for 10 years, but I didn't spend all of my 10 years in marketing. For the first 4 years, I was at BrightTalk running webinar and email marketing campaigns. And my number one client was actually product marketers and demand generation professionals. And that experience taught me to be an advocate for two groups. So after running, I will say, over 1,000 webinars, I became a huge advocate for customers. I was in so many kickoff calls where customers didn't have a clear goal in mind, didn't understand their problem statement, and needed a lot of help to get to the point where they wanted to. And I realized how important the role of CS reps was in that process. So it made me a huge customer advocate in all the work that I did. Then I transitioned a little bit into a subject matter expert solution engineering role, and I joined a lot of sales calls, probably too many, and it made me an advocate for a second group of people, and that's sales professionals. So I'm not gonna play the world's smallest violin for sales folks right now, because I think they get compensated very well, especially in SF, but being on calls is hard. Pitching your product is hard. Talking to difficult folks on the phone is hard. And the more things that we can do in our roles to really understand how they sell and what that experience is like and support it is really important. And you'll see the idea of that advocacy throughout the presentation. So a little bit about Asana, if you haven't heard about us, we help teams orchestrate their work so they can move faster, and everything from day-to-day tasks to large strategic initiatives. And what I want to talk to you about today is basically a case study of a launch that we did in February of this year. Asana for Marketing Creative Teams was our first vertical launch, and it changed a lot in our company. It changed how we went to market, it changed how we worked with sales, it changed how we worked with the product team, and it triggered a lot, and it was definitely, I think, one of the most exciting years in my career so far. So what we'll talk about is defining product marketing at Asana, and I think defining it anywhere, evolving our business model, how we're doing it, but I think there'll be a lot of lessons. Things are constantly shifting no matter what company you're at. Getting on the product roadmap and what I learned about that experience, and then finally going to market in 90 days. So defining product marketing. I was a political science major at college, and one thing that taught me when you study campaigns is what they tell you is if you don't define yourself early and effectively, your opponent will do it for you. And so I think you're never too early in your development as a company, and it's never too late to try to define your charter. So here's how we think about it at Asana. We think of PMM as the API to the business. So when marketing is thinking about campaigns and initiatives, we want to make sure that they ladder up to company objectives. When product is building things, we want to make sure that it's actually addressing the pain points of our customers or the customers that we want to get. And when sales is going to market, we want to make sure that they're going with the message and position that is effective. Now, the shadow side of all this is that it's a ton of work and it's a huge commitment, but what it helps address is the other thing that can happen in companies with PMM is that you just become a service desk. Product basically shows up with a fully built product that you've never seen and tells you to figure out how to launch this. And I think this helps PMM really deliver on the vision of what the role can be, and that's a strategic advisor to every part of the business. And you can't be an effective advocate for customers and sales if you don't understand how your product team builds product. So this is kind of a basic double diamond that a lot of product teams now use. It started in industrial engineering, but a lot of product teams use it today. And I'm not advocating for product marketing being involved in every part of this process, but there are a few key areas. When your UXR team is selecting the audience that they're going to be researching, when your product team is zeroing in on a solution, on a pain, a business challenge that they want to solve, or they're figuring out what the solution is. Product marketing needs to be there because product, and they should be this way, they want to build the cool things. They want to build things that a lot of people will use. They want to build something that they can show their friends and show how innovative it is. And someone needs to be in the room to say, this is a cool problem to solve, but will people pay to have it solved? This is a really cool feature, but does our audience care? Or this is a really interesting audience you've selected, but is it going to create confirmation bias for what you already want to build? Are we getting our audience right? And finally, this is what I think we're all used to is, PMM works with creating the messaging, the positioning for launches, making sure the bill of materials covers everything that needs to be delivered at launch, works with performance marketing and lifecycle marketing teams on campaigns and launches, and make sure that everyone from people who are getting onboarded at Asana to people who are veterans constantly know what the latest and greatest with our product is. But what I really want to zero in on is that we want to orchestrate that work. We want to enable the teams to do this. We want to provide value when it comes to strategic thinking and direction. We don't want to do that work for them. We want to make sure that they're enabled to do it. So, evolving our business model. I think I've been to a lot of talks over the past 2 days, and I really liked seeing product-driven growth as a topic. This is something that Asana has been at the forefront of for a while. I can take zero credit for that. I've only been there for a year and a half. But we have a really exciting flywheel model, and I'll take you through it, and I'll take you in this context will be relevant when we talk about the launch. So we have a free product as well as a trial of our product, and our performance marketing team has gotten really great at creating these beautiful landing pages and driving people either into our free product or starting a trial. And at that point, once they're in our free product or they started a trial, our new user experience team takes over. And their job is to make people adopt our product. They want to guide them to our best, most powerful features, make sure that they're using them quickly. Here you're looking at our timeline feature, which is our version of Gantt charts. Here you're looking at custom fields, which is an amazing way to sort and filter and monitor, track your work. And once folks are seeing that and they're using those features, they then convert either through self-serve, which means they never talk to anyone at Asana, they never interact with a sales rep, or through low touch, which means they might get into chat, ask a few questions about pricing or security, or maybe exchange an email or two, but the sales cycle is still 24 or 48 hours. And this worked really well for a very long time, and it still works amazingly well. But the reason it worked so well in the beginning is because our category was still being created. There was no budget for collaborative work management. The decision makers at the top, it wasn't on their radar yet, but the end users already felt the pain and already wanted these problems solved. So they were looking for these solutions. But something started to change, and as you might have seen my job title, I was hired as an enterprise product marketing manager, so obviously the leadership in the company was seeing and investing in these changes. And when I first joined, I'll give them credit, our head of solution sales and our head of solutions engineering gave me a month, but then they started putting bi-weekly, that's twice a week, not once every 2 weeks, hour-long meetings to basically bend my ear. And I'll save you the whole process, but this is where it took time to be an advocate, because I did not understand what they were trying to communicate to me about what was happening in their part of the business and what they were seeing. And it took a lot of commitment to get it down to paper. But I'll boil it down, and what they were seeing essentially is a new type of person was showing up to our party, and we weren't going out to find them, but directors and VPs, very often in marketing, were suddenly in sales conversations with our teams. And things were going differently in those conversations than in the model that I just described. And what we were finding is that these folks had complex workflows. They wanted to move an entire multifaceted, cross-functional workflow into Asana, and they had a lot of questions and a lot of requests, and they expected a more traditional sales software process, buying process. They were also identifying gaps in our product offering. They were saying, I would move my 200 product marketing managers and demand gen and campaign people into Asana, but you don't have X and you don't have Y, and we need this to be able to do it. And finally, the big thing they were saying is, if we do this, we can land the entire department. We can get into marketing, and that gives us a huge landing spot in the organization to then be able to grow. So once we had all of this was information that the sales team, the CS team kind of intrinsically knew, and this is where product marketing comes in, because the hard job is now, well, how do we convince product this is something they should prioritize? Their roadmap is already built out. So how did we do this? One, we first wanted to identify the opportunity, that there was a large unmet need in the market. And this is the part where I think product marketers overthink the most or freak out the most about every time you're asked for like the total addressable market or what's the impact on the business going to be. We did something pretty basic, but I think effective. Just went into LinkedIn, identified how many creative producers, how many particular marketing roles existed in North America. We just started with a market that we knew we could address, and then identified which ones of them came from larger companies. I can't tell you the cutoff, but where we believed that the software decision buying process was a little bit different. And we just showed here are all of these people we can't effectively touch unless we have this solution for them. We then started, we also wanted to parrot some executive language in this presentation and align with it. So we believe that the collaborative work management category is heating up. Winners and losers will come to the forefront pretty soon. And if we want to be one of the winners and not one of the companies that are consolidated, we need to move quickly. So we aligned with executive messaging when we did this presentation. And we also want to talk about upside. So we believe that if we landed in an entire marketing organization and we got to talk to marketing ops, that would connect us with other operational departments to think about how work is done in their organization. All of that is cool, but it doesn't really get people too excited because at the end of the day, there was like a very clear ask. We wanted the product team to build forms, intake forms for work. We wanted them to build proofing, which is markup on images. We wanted them a way to do approvals in Asana for work. And finally, a few key integrations that we saw a lot of asks for. And this is where I think a lot of product marketers can go wrong, which is you go straight to product and you say, here's what I want you to build. And I would recommend you use product managers' love language, and that is user stories. And you convey the story to them and let them come up with a solution. And this worked really effectively for us. I will say I have these beautiful slides now, just so that you know all of this was done in a Google Doc with text only. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that. And what I want to take you through are some slides of that story. Now, it looks beautiful now, but again, it was all just text on a page when we started. And the idea was basically this. We took a fictional company, Webflix, and they had a very successful show, Weirder Stuff, and part of their marketing strategy was regionalization. And this is a totally made up story. And they wanted to, part of their strategy for growth was regionalization, so they create a portfolio for it, and they assign a project to the regionalization manager to basically bring Weirder Stuff to South Korea. That person gets the notification that they're in charge of that project. They go in, they see the creative brief, and they see, oh my, I have to create Instagram ads, Facebook ads, a whole bunch of collateral. So they find in the company wiki the intake form for their creative production team, and they submit a request. And they say, hey, we're moving this show to South Korea. We need all of these assets. Here's the creative brief. The creative designer in the regional office receives the requests, puts it into a Gantt chart to create a work back schedule, so all of the tasks are clearly identified, when they're due is clearly seen. And then this is where some of the magic starts to happen. The designer, she is working in Adobe, and she doesn't have to leave her tool. She gets her task from Asana, and she can immediately work on the Instagram ad, save it, upload it to the task, and basically ask for feedback. The manager can then, in Asana, leave comments, annotate that image, and the conversation can happen within Asana back and forth until it's to a place where it's ready for approval and the campaign can go out. And I want to say this was the most effective part in the Google Doc that we shared with our head of product, our executives. This is where most of the conversation and most of the comments were happening. Why can't they do this now with our existing feature? What would happen if we built it like this? All of these requests for forms, proofing, the integration with Adobe, they existed before. It's just putting it into one user story and showing how impactful it could be for a customer really made things click, and I think moved things along, or at least that's the story I tell myself. So I highly recommend that when you're thinking about pitching to product, that this is a way that you tell that story and you really make the customer come alive for them. So the reward for hard work is more hard work. There was a bit of silence for a few weeks, maybe a month, and then we came back, and lo and behold, our product team decided to move heaven and earth to launch these 4 products on one day, something that we hadn't done before. And there were 4 separate teams working in parallel, driving all to one date. And at that point, sat down with our CMO and kind of looked around and said, hey, this is a brand new go-to-market motion for us, and it's brand new for us in a number of ways. As I mentioned, we were really driven by self-serve, and this was obviously a more complex story that would need to be told by sales. So how could we explain to the market and bring this solution to market that was more complex of a story, a more multifaceted of a story than we've ever told before? So what was different is we were targeting a specific role. We were very much a horizontal company up until that point. And this was one of our first sales-driven go-to-market motions. So we needed to have sales involved earlier, involved more deeply. And this was something that was new for them as well. Suddenly I came knocking on their door and they're like, oh yeah, launch is happening. Why are you here? Well, we needed their input in a way that we didn't before. So how did we go about making sure that this launch was successful and creating a whole new go-to-market strategy? Again, we wanted to focus in on the audience, and we were very scrappy, and you'll see in some of the slides what these first initial docs actually look like before we got design resources on them, because all of our design team was working on this launch and wasn't also able to accommodate us. So we really focused on job titles first, because before we thought of folks as either a team lead or a project lead. And here we needed specific job titles that our sales team could go into LinkedIn and LinkedIn Navigator and actually search these people and find out more about them. We wanted to also understand their metrics and what they cared about. So each play had, here are the 4 or 5 job titles you might encounter, people who use this workflow, here are the metrics they care about, and here are the pains that we believe that they feel doing their job today. Here's how Asana can help solve those, and most importantly, here are customer stories of folks like them who are already solving these problems. So giving our sales team the entire kind of story that they needed throughout the call that they would have or the email conversations they would have to be able to reference every point in that story that they needed to tell. And this sales playbook actually ended up being extremely valuable, not just for our sales team, but for all of the supporting teams. So marketing, CS, even product began using it as a touch point to understand what was the strategy of this launch and what were we actually trying to do. Then, we started working with our content team. We realized we really needed to create a lot of content to help support sales and a lot of training to help support sales through this process. And what we wanted to do is create a matrix that aligned to their existing funnel, to the existing stages of their sales journey, and say, what content do we need there? What training do we need there? And how do we help the rep go from one to another? It's useful for a number of reasons. One, when you're strapped for time and resources, it really helps you understand what is that minimal viable product, or where are you going to have gaps because you decided to support one area versus another. But also, at the end of the day, when you're spending a lot of time and resources on something and the executive sees a 2-pager run across their desk and she says, well, why did we create this? You can say, here's the exact point in the sales process where this helps address a need for our sales team and helps them move conversation forward and hopefully affects revenue. So we delivered a full funnel content bundle, so something that covered every piece, but we were MVP. We picked pretty much one piece for each stage. So we wanted our sales reps to have something to share at each stage of the conversation, whether it was a product overview, a case study with very specific ROI statements, or something that was a little bit more thought leadership oriented. And I will say that those case studies and those metrics ended up everywhere on our website, in call decks, and became one of the most used pieces of content that we had. And then finally, again, being an advocate for sales, I keep hearing the same things over and over, and sometimes they go into the background, but you should really focus on them. What we heard from sales constantly is every time I'm on the phone with someone in marketing, their question is always, what is the best way to do this? What is the best way to run a event launch? What is the best way to run my content marketing calendar? What's the best way to do a product launch? And so what we provided for them was one, ultimate guides. So basically guides that took what went through each of the plays that we had created, each of the workflows, and also demo scripts, so they could go through an Asana instance and actually show someone what that would look like. And these ended up being the 2 most loved things by our sales team because it really addressed what they were hearing over and over on calls. And then the thing that I'll kind of begin wrapping up with is we realized that we couldn't just dump all of this stuff on sales desk and walk away and say, you're welcome, we did everything, here's all the content. We really needed to bring them along. And as we thought about how to do training, there were a couple of big lessons for me here. One is try to keep your entire sales team together as much as you can in the beginning. There'll come a point where you can't because it's too specialized, but to get them excited, to get them bought in, keep them in the same room. So our kickoff, our big presentation on the playbook, that was done with the entire org in one room, which was really nice. And we also didn't assume that just because this was a very much a sales-driven effort, that all of the individual contributors understood that this product offering was really coming from sales. So we had the head of sales, we had the head of solutions engineering really come up and talk to folks about how this was something we requested of product, how product really showed up and delivered, and how it was the sales team's time to really take things on. And I think that really helped a lot of people start wrapping their minds, a lot of the individual reps wrapping their minds around what was happening. And I'll give you a few of the agendas of actual conversations we had. So, we went really deep on why are we pursuing a solution go-to-market strategy and how is it different? Why are we verticalizing suddenly in our company? Why target marketing and creative teams out of all the different teams that we could be targeting? So we really wanted to make sure that our sales reps understood the strategy and that it became theirs and they took ownership of it. What was in it for them? Why have a sales playbook? Talk to them a lot about how standardizing this methodology would make sure that they didn't have to look for content or constantly figure out what the next step in their sales process was, and also showed them metrics from teams that had developed playbooks and the impact it had on their revenue, their ability to hit and attain quota. And I think a lot of that stuff landed with them as well. And also, I'm sure a lot of the folks in the room at the time were kind of scared because they were like, well, I've been doing it this one way now at Asana for 2-3 years, and suddenly there's a whole new strategy. So we also wanted to make sure that, hey, we're not leaving you guys alone at the starting line. We're going to be with you through the entire race, and there's going to be a lot of training and launching. This is where our sales enablement team really came in, and they did a lot to make sure that our sales team felt supported throughout that whole process. And then we went really deep as subject matter experts. We even, at times, brought in customers who were already using Asana for marketing and creative purposes. We talked to other subject matter experts, and we really wanted to make sure that our sales team understood deeply what does the marketing tech stack look like? What does creative production look like today? And a lot of this stuff is very exciting. If you think about, large creative production houses, it's really stories that they could connect with around their favorite shows and thinking about how those are created. So this also was something that helped them a lot. And then the last thing that we did, I use my profile here, but basically one of the things that we did with enablement is just found so many folks on LinkedIn, blurred out their face and their name, and basically did a lot of rings or fake calls. We basically got each team, the SMB team, the mid-market team in, and basically said, hey, here's a particular prospect. Your SDR has set up a 30-minute call for you with them. How will you approach talking to them? And this is where we could really point them back to the sales playbook and all the content and materials that were created. And they suddenly realized, oh, there's so much, at first they would look at a profile and say, I have no idea how I would talk to this person, like head of creative production at HBO. But then they would be driven into these playbooks and say, oh, I actually have my talking points. I actually understand what this person cares about. I actually know how to have this conversation. And this ended up being some of the most highly reviewed content and training that we did. And the impact was nice. I think the biggest thing that we saw was a rise in confidence and effectiveness on the sales team and the depth of the conversations they were having. And this was something that we weren't even aiming for, but something we really were excited to see, that going more vertically into a particular product launch, into a particular category, allowed the folks who've been selling horizontally for a very long time to really talk about the value of Asana in a very specific and targeted way. So, main things I talked about, I think I went pretty quickly. I'm not sure where I am on time. Cool, 5 minutes for questions. We talked about defining PMM's charter. I think it's really important, never too early to do. Be an advocate for customers and sales. Know how to influence your roadmap. Understand what product managers, their love language, I really do think it's user stories. So as much as you can do that, I think it works. And go to market with how your product is actually sold. So a lot of the work that we did here was influenced by talking to sales folks at Asana and asking them, how are you actually selling today? What do those conversations look like? And creating content that they could actually use. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic. It was a great way to end the day, too, because it moved us from theoretical into specifics with clear results. That's wonderful for giving us the window inside this particular company. We have time for maybe 2 questions or so. And so, raise your hand. It's really hard for us to see because of the lights. Oh, okay. You'll be up next. Oh, we've never seen you.
Hi, awesome presentation. Thank you so much. We are launching a product in a couple months, so super timely. One of the biggest challenges we see is the fear of that very first or second conversation. How did you get your reps to kind of open that door and have that first meeting and conversation with your reps or with your prospects?
With new prospects? I mean, chances are they're probably already talking to them and they're not prepared. I don't know in your case if they've actually never talked to them, but chances are they probably already have and they already weren't prepared. But the biggest thing was having these mock conversations and starting with allowing them to do it just with themselves and their peers, so it's low pressure, but then ratcheting up the pressure a little bit and saying, okay, well now do it with your manager, still in a one-on-one, but then maybe having a session where you have 20 or 30 reps present and they come on stage and do it, so you can artificially recreate the pressure of a first call with a real customer, but without the consequences of not doing well.
Awesome. Got a question right here in the front.
You talked about opportunity sizing and for the specific example, how you used LinkedIn. Just wondering if you had other examples of how you sized the market and made a business case.
That's a really good question. I think one thing that we've done is actually ask the question of how accurate does the sizing have to be when product or executives ask that question. And a lot of times we've actually kind of fallen back on the t-shirt sizing of because you're usually trying to identify the difference between a trade-off between 2 different decisions. So you're trying to identify which one is the larger one. So you don't actually need to know the full TAM, but you might need to know whether something is small, medium, or large. Aside from LinkedIn, we worked with research firms and analyst groups. I think if you can't afford actually to hire someone and do that research, there's a lot of papers and reports that you can license and kind of get a sense of it. Another one that I found useful is actually the Bureau of Labor and Statistics has a lot of great data if you're looking at a particular job title or role.
Okay, we are right at 5:15. This has been a wonderful 2 days. Everyone, if you like people who are speaking, like Danielle, so sync up on LinkedIn, connect with people who put this great event on. Thank you very much for the 2 great days. Give it up one more time.
And we're hiring, so come find us.